Did you know that Samson didn't lose his strength just because his hair was cut? The real reason is much deeper and is related to his disobedience. Samson's story is one of the most well-known in the Bible, a man with superhuman strength. From birth, Samson was dedicated to God under the Nazirite vow, which included never cutting his hair. But was his hair truly the source of his strength? Throughout his life, Samson broke several parts of his covenant with God. The touched dead bodies, got involved with Philistine women, and violated his vow of purity. These acts distanced him further from God, and the cutting of his hair was the final sign of his disobedience. In Judges 16:20, we read that the Lord had left him. Samson's true loss of strength occurred because God withdrew from him, not simply because of the haircut. Samson's strength was rooted in his faithfulness to God. When he broke that covenant, he lost God's divine protection and his strength. If you enjoy biblical stories, share this with more people.
Do you enjoy how this creator actually likes to lie and defeat his own argument within his own videos? And I'm going to tell you in a minute how this Samson story is based on the story of Hercules. Many think Gilgamesh could be a little part, but mostly it's Hercules. But even within this own video, he says that God left Samson because he broke his covenant with him. But he plays it up like God is like, all right, Samson, you touched a dead animal. All right, Samson, you did this, you did that. You married a Philistine. You got the haircut. That's just too much. I just can't deal with you. That you just broke all your vows. He been broke all the covenants with him. He been acting out from his culture. And basically this story is trying to teach the Israelite people that you need to stay within your culture. You need to segregate yourself and stay within your people. That you can't be with other people. Marrying other people is wrong. And this type of information was used to justify why white people shouldn't marry black people and Asian people should marry, white people and so on and so forth. This has been used to justify racism throughout at least the American and European history. But this story is a manufactured story based somewhat on Gilgamesh, but mostly on Hercules. Because just like in the Hercules story and the Samson story, from birth he was imbued with this power, and Hercules was strong at birth, killing a serpent within his crib when he was born. Grows up to be this strong man who goes through 12 labors, kills lions, all these similar things that Samson goes through. Faces these innumerable enemies, and both of them do the same thing of facing large groups of people and being able to defeat all of them. The final one that kind of makes these stories very similar is the fact of both of these men fall in love with a woman, right? And they are so in love with this woman that they're willing to be tricked by this woman. Delilah, she asks him what is the source of his strength. He tells her two different ways initially with some rope, and then she demonstrates that she is part of the buffoonery. Hercules' wife does something a little bit similar, but she gets captured by the centaurs. So both of these women are also being subjected by the will of their husband's enemies. The centaurs for Hercules' wife, the Philistines for Delilah. When they finally, because his enemies have this sway over their wife, these men are both foolish enough to trust their wives. And when Delilah finally gets the truth out of Samson and cuts off his hair, now his flesh, his strength is gone, and they're able to manhandle him and take him. Hercules is not taken, but the centaur was pissed off that Hercules had shot him with an arrow that was poisoned with hydra blood. And so the centaur tricked his wife into telling her that if you give your husband this cloak that was smeared with poison, centaur poison, then it will bind you guys closer together forever. And so she gives him the cloak. He wraps himself with it, and his flesh, this is Hercules' flesh is burned to the degree where he now is in great pain and he loses his strength. So both of them lose their strength based on their wives being tricked by the enemy of their husband. Samson, when his hair starts to grow back a little bit and he's brought out on display, he snatches down the pillars of the temple that they're in, the building they're in rather, and those pillars create his death. He dies by his own hand. He dies by suicide, being in a crushed building. Hercules, once his strength has left him, he builds his own pyre builds his own pyre and commits suicide of his body, and his body is burned. And then, Zeus raises him up to heaven so that he can sit on the right side of Zeus. That part sounds familiar too, right? It's just like in our live last night when we was going over the Greek origin myths, of how so many similarities from the Greeks entered into the biblical story, especially the Old Testament story. We see these throughout the Bible. And we see more than just the Greek. We see the Babylonians, the Assyrians, the Akkadians, the Sumerians, and the Kemetic all wrapped up into it. And next week, we're going to talk about the Indus creation story and some of the similarities that you'll see in their story as far as the biblical story as well. But Samson is just a compilation of people like Gilgamesh and Hercules. And if you cannot see this, then you cannot see your way out of this this veil that they've placed over your eyes, and see the truth that these religions are just man-made creations to try to explain the universe. If we were still in that state right now, we would be here in San Antonio, we will be giving praise to the rain deity, because Texas has been going through a drought for the last 2.5 years, and we will be like, oh, it's raining today, praise the rain god of Texas. And that's how people back in those time frames created their gods. And then as they got a little bit smarter, they started to change the nature of their gods so that it would fit into their motif of that day. And that is what Christianity is today. It has changed their God different from what was 2,000 years ago to make it fit into the mode that they can justify this belief still today. But Samson, it's one of the worst stories. I can't stand that story, because it is one of the few stories that everybody will admit that this was a black man, and he was the dumbest motherfucker. One of the dumbest people in the Bible. But and I did a video about that a couple years ago about how dumb Samson is. So what do you guys think? And always remember, you have to free yourself to be yourself, because your greatness is non-negotiable. Good journey, good vibrations.